Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. I hope you enjoy. Story number 1, Monsters of Our Own Making, written by Dr. Doritos, MD, who can also be found on Wattpad and Royal Road. When we first encountered humanity, they extended a hand of friendship. It was clear from the moment we met that the United Systems of Terra was like the countless other, weak, peaceful federations we'd previously encountered and subjugated. The feeble mass drivers and nuclear missile launch cells on their ships served only to corroborate our impressions of their weakness. And so we continued with standard protocol, as we Khazari had done so many times throughout our history. We offered them an ultimatum. Submit to the Khazari Imperium, surrender all of your technologies and your population as slaves, or die. Our ambassadors told theirs. We gave them a month for their response, roughly the amount of time it took for us to ready an invasion fleet. Like most other races under our thumb, the Terrans refused our ultimatum, and so we dispatched a fleet to teach them a lesson, as we had done so many times before. The 12th Invasion Fleet subsequently ransacked one of their outlying colonies, pulverizing its infrastructure along with the colony's citizens. With devastating plasma lances, what remained of the survivors were rounded up and painfully gutted, with the recording of this message broadcasted to Terran media. They threw fleets at us in response, to no avail. Their mass drivers and nuclear missiles failed to penetrate our shields and point defense networks, scoring them a claw nail's worth of victories for every handful we grabbed. Then we struck the next world, ravaging it and its people. We sent them another message, once more, urging them to submit. It was after the second massacre of colonists that we discovered that a coup had occurred in their capital. All the Terran broadcasts that we monitored pointed to the same thing. Their leaders had been replaced. Naturally, we saw this as an opportunity and pushed deeper into the newly rebranded Dominion of Man's territory. We reached their 3rd and 4th colony worlds with 2 separate fleets, both admirals notifying command of the commencement of their routine operations. Then they vanished. Nothing on our sensors. No distress calls from the fleets of any kind. It was as if they were erased from existence. Thinking it a freak, still a coincidence, we sent more fleets to investigate. It was a blood-curdling surprise when I and my colleagues in high command lost contact with these fleets as well. Any other fleets we sent out suffered similar fates, their transmissions cutting out mid-response if they managed to get through at all. Our strategists could never figure out why. Neither scouting stealth ships nor battle survivors ever returned to tell the tale. To add to the mystery, stars along the outskirts of our territory began to shine, their solar brilliance corresponding to those of supernova. I began to assume the worst, wondering what could have happened and why these incidents might have happened. It was only when a human fleet dropped into one of our core worlds, Jovar Prime, that I learned why. After a conference with my fellow admirals, we were subjected to blaring alarms that screamed throughout our space station. A small Terran fleet, not unlike the ones of the 12th Invasion Fleet had so easily defeated, had popped up along the edge of the system. Originally, we would have disregarded this minor incursion and assumed it to be taken care of by our patrols. However, the thought of our lost fleets and the fact that these humans had bypassed our outer systems concerned us greatly. We treated this incursion as a serious threat, assuming the worst and broadcasted for reinforcements while the system's fleet raced towards the enemy. Jovar's sun dimming behind their backs, with the firepower far exceeding that of all of our combined invasion fleets. We felt confident in our defense. Mere moments after they exited the sun's gravity well, they were wiped out simultaneously. Hundreds of brilliant fireballs lit up the space around the station, dazzling us with the most fear-inducing light show we have ever seen. I stood there, jaw agape as my mind attempted to comprehend what I had just seen. I looked at my colleagues for confirmation, only to realize that my great fear had come to light. The light show was indeed real, and they too were shocked by the abrupt destruction of Jovar's mighty defense fleet. The luminosity from the detonation soon subsided, leaving a cloud of debris that glittered under Jovar's radiance. Our senses readjusted, seeing the human fleet continue their approach. I remember the conversation I had with my colleagues as we analyzed the fleet composition. Unable to fathom what I had seen, I asked the other admirals. They only got 12 ships. I identified one carrier traveling alongside its cruiser and destroyer escorts, wondering what had just happened to our fleet. It was then that our senses picked up 12 small objects exiting the carrier's hangars. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that these objects were not the standard fighters documented in our records. These were some sort of drone variation of fighters. The 12 drones proceeded to engage their drives, jumping towards Jovar Prime. Our sensors picked up no exit residue, leaving us to wonder where those drones were deployed to. Perhaps they were scouts attempting to conduct reconnaissance of our core system. For a few minutes we sat staring at our sensors, considering our options and hoping that reinforcements would arrive. Then a flash blinded our instruments. We turned, wondering where this sudden disturbance originated from, only to find that it had come from Jovar Prime. More accurately, it had come from the complete annihilation of the planet's core. The entire world, along with the billions of citizens living on it, were erased in an instant. Oceans turned into plasma, reaching out from the planet erratically like an eruption of solar flares. Continental sheets carrying the molten remains of our cities were ejected from the world, cracking away from Jovar Prime like an eggshell. The satellites and stations in orbit were all but blown away, like cosmic dust riding solar wind. We were so entranced by the terror of what we had just witnessed that we failed to realize our station had been boarded. Our bodies, merely lifeless husks after seeing the destruction of a planet, gave little resistance to the Terran soldiers that rushed into our station. I recall little as I was dragged away by their mammalian forms, only snippets of their conversations. All security personnel eliminated. Hostile HVT secure. You're cleared to wipe the system, one of them said as I was led aboard their massive carrier. They pushed me along the tight hallways of the polished-looking vessel, directing me towards their brig. I walked in silence, looking at the windows as a final swarm of hundreds of drones zipped off towards Jovar's sun, closing my eyes as the human fleet engaged their drives. They eventually transported me and my fellow admirals off the carrier, bringing us to an undisclosed location. There, they surgically implanted some sort of device which connected to our nervous systems. The speed and precision with which they conducted the operation was frightening, suggesting that they had experience. I shuddered to think at how many must have suffered terrible fates for the Terrans to learn so much, but also wondered if this was some sort of penance. It was then that I resigned myself to my fate, abandoning all hope of rescue, even abandoning all hope of my continued existence. I now sit alone, heart beating through my chest as I hyperventilate from the hellish emotional overload from the Terran's neural implants. I feel, to the fullest extent of my nervous system's capacity, the anguish and despair felt by those we had slaughtered, those we had tortured, those that we had enslaved. And with this moment's reprieve from torture, all I could do was reflect and wait for my eventual doom at the hands of the Terran scientists, looking to conduct devious experiments. As tears streamed down my scales, I couldn't help but laugh. Perhaps I had finally lost my mind, but I cackled at the poetic justice of the universe. In an ironic twist of fate, we, the monster dragons who had subjugated countless races, had fallen to monsters of our own making. End of story. Story number 2. Sleep is for the weak, written by Echoing Cascade. Chief Engineer Alison Alvarez was having a nice meal in the corner of the station's mess hall, while drinking an obscene amount of coffee and having a heated discussion with an empty bar stool to her right. She was eating fries and a burger made with some kind of green meat she insisted on calling Soylent Green, to the confusion of the AN staff and the annoyance of her fellow humans. The fact any time someone asked how her meal was, she would answer, "It varies from person to person," wasn't making her any friends either. "Is a seat taken?" Allison turned to look at Conrad, who sat across from her. He was the man in charge of sentient resources, and bows to No King, the ranking Aeon security officer, with 4 of his guards, and behind them dances in shadows of the station's medical expert. Allison. Hi. What can I help you with? Conrad sat down, bows to No King, moved to his right, and as all 4 of his guards aimed their rifles in the general vicinity of the engineer. Conrad. No, not much. I have a few questions, is all. Allison looked to the side and tilted her head in confusion as she saw dancers of shadows in the fencing posture, practicing lunges with a medical injector like it was a rapier. Yeah, a few questions, sure. She looked at the empty stool to her right, who refused to come to her aid. Spineless bastard, now you decide to shut up. Conrad, I'll cut to the chase. You need to take a vacation and sleep sometime this week. What? No, I'm fine. She took a sip of the pint full of hot coffee on her table and looked at the empty bar stool to her right, which nodded in agreement. Conrad took his datapad, cleared his throat to read. Chief Engineer Allison has been seen, hands above her head, looking into space, laughing maniacally for several seconds on numerous occasions for the last couple of weeks. Allison looked away and Conrad continued, having discussions with inanimate objects and making increasingly bad jokes. Conrad, that last one you can disregard. Bow to No King. I disagree. Conrad gave the Aeon a surprised look. Laughing is not illegal, and neither is talking to yourself. Conrad raised an eyebrow. Allison sighed. Fine, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but the Aeon government gave me a contract for the planetary defense station and a rather large budget, and I may or may not have forgotten to sleep now and again as I worked on it. She ate a couple of fries and took a sip of her coffee pint, which yelled in pain. She chose to ignore the screams. Tell you what, I promise to take it easy for the next few days and meet dancers in shadows for a checkup. Deal? Conrad nodded and began to get up, but then narrowed his eyes and sat back down. Show me the blueprints. Allison began to sweat. It's full of technical stuff. You'll be bored, trust me. Conrad raised his hand to bows to No King, and his guards all aimed their rifles at Allison's head. Allison. Allison deflated, set the plans on Conrad's datapad, crossed her arms and pouted. Conrad began to read, and very soon his eyes went wide. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said the single word, Dark! Dancers in shadows lunged forward at Allison with a loud Hiya! And injected her with a sedative on the side of her neck. As she drifted into unconsciousness, Allison whispered, Son of a... and then gave an angry look to her own chair, which she thought had her back. Conrad sighed as the security guards picked her up and began carrying her to the infirmary under the watchful eye of dancers in shadows. Bows to No King moved next to Conrad. What was she making? Conrad handed him a datapad. Bows to No King began to read. Okay, the amount of weapons on that thing is ridiculous, but overkill is not part of the human dictionary, so I don't see any issue. Hell, some of this is really ingenious. Bows. I don't see any problems with this. He reread the project's name. Bows. Peace Moon. The idea to use terraforming drill to siphon power from a nearby star is genius. Conrad. Yeah, except it's a battle station's main weapon, and the objective is to use it to blow up planets. Bows to No King gasped in shock. Bows. What in the hell? How did you figure that out? Conrad picked up Allison's fries and ate them. Well, the design is a dead giveaway. He grabbed his datapad back and looked up page 14 of the blueprints and zoomed in on the Death Star picture featured there. At least if you're human. End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.